At Subway, start 2010 right with surprisingly low-fat choices. The Piled High Subway Club or Turkey Melt, fresh toasted under bubbly cheese. Both are part of a Subway Fresh Fit meal, a simple way to enjoy eating better. Subway, eat fresh. The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Had some belated NFL stuff to get to. We're going to have Mike Lombardi, and then at about the 40-minute mark, we're going to bring in my buddy Geoff, a diehard Viking fan, the best man in my wedding. I was the best man in his, and he's going to commiserate with us a little bit about the loss. But first, we couldn't wait until next week for the Mega Playoff Podcast, probably because we won't even be able to get this guy. He's Mr. Multimedia now. I don't even know how we'd be able to lock him down. We'd have to talk to his multiple agents, but...
No, you can always lock me down. Are you kidding? I'm like, whatever you say, I do. I'm like what Uncle Junior says. You want something done, I get it done.
On the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, our old friend from the National Football Post, Mike Lombardi. I couldn't wait until next week to discuss the Brad Childress collapse with you. It was, I mean, the great, well, it wasn't a great thing about that game because I feel terrible for the Vikings fans. I just think that was as bad of a loss as you can have. But, man, if you and I had gone into a log cabin with my buddy Geoff, diehard Viking fan, and tried to script the most likely but agonizing way that game could have ended for the Vikings fans, I swear we could have come up with that sequence. First down and goal, first down from the 33, under a minute left. All you need is basically 5 more yards.
Right.
And it all goes to hell. So let's walk through it.
Well, let's just make sure at the end we understand that Brad got an extension, so they're going to have 3 more years of enjoying this type of thing that's going to happen.
You know what it's reminiscent of, actually, is when the Clippers extended Mike Dunleavy after their one playoff run, but as the team was falling apart. I guess the Vikings did it when they were riding high, but, man, that, he needs to go now. I don't know how they bring him back, and now he's going to come back, and it's a nightmare. But let's go through that last possession.
109 to go in the game. Yep. I mean, they get the ball there, and certainly now, the number one thing you've got to think about here is exactly what you think is an absolute lock field goal. And it can't be what the position coach, the field goal kick, the special teams coach says, well, he can make it from 50. No. We don't want this game to go to overtime. We don't want to put it, we have to win the game right here. And then you've got to figure out exactly what yards you've got to get the ball to, and then run your offense accordingly. I mean, I don't think you can, once you determine you need 15 yards, you can get into what Brad did, is just get into 4-corner offense and think you're going to run three times and win the game.
Do you think, all right, let's say first down. What should have been the call there?
Well, I think first down, he runs it there. And when he got stuffed on first down, significantly stuffed, I think they almost lost yardage on the first down call. I think once you get there, he went for no gain. Now at 106, you let the clock keep running, but you got to have another play where it can't be another run. I think the criticism is the second down call, because you just can't think, oh, by the way, we didn't get anything on first down. Let's try it again and we're going to get something. Yeah. Everybody was up in the line, and I think you had to come up with even if you needed to spill a timeout there or do something to where you did not, because you had 2 timeouts remaining.
Right.
Going into the second down call. You had 2 timeouts, let the thing go all the way down, call a timeout, get a really good play that you like, whether it's spread them out, run a draw, spread them out, run a screen, spread them out, throw the ball. But you got to get 10 yards. You can't risk it for a third down call. And that's where I think Favre, for everybody who wants to give him criticism for the play, I think the game was lost on first and second down.
I actually, what would have been a perfect play for one of those 2 downs is the famous Norv Turner play. Everybody goes to the left, but the tight end sneaks across to the right. And
shoot screen. Yeah, no question.
Yeah. Because, at that point, the interesting part of the drive was that they really ran amok a little bit on the Saints in the previous couple plays. So then the Saints were like, all right, well, we got to move everybody in. And if you're going to beat us, then fine, we'll get the ball back. They're basically daring the Vikings to throw deep or do something.
But on that drive, the only significant run that they had on the drive was a 2-yard gain by was a 2-yard gain by Peterson on 2nd and 10.
Are you sure? I thought Peterson ran through the
No, the only guard
line of scrimmage.
No, I'm sorry. Chester Taylor ran for 14 yards.
Yeah. That was the only run?
Right, it was the only run of significance. They ran the ball they ran the ball 3 times in the drive, 4 times actually when you count the second down, and the 14-yard gain by Taylor was the best one, which New Orleans used their final timeout, which was a mistake at that time. That's a horse of another color.
I'm going to the play-by-play.
I've got it right in front of me. Here it is. 1 run, 2 runs, 3 runs, 4 runs, 5 runs on the play.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I was thinking of yeah, you're right. I was thinking of that Chester Taylor run, but that was when he had that run, at that point I was thinking, because he ran 14 down to the Saints 33. Right. I was thinking, do the Saints we actually had do the Saints let them score here? Right. They just let them run into the end zone and try to get the ball back as fast as they can because it just didn't seem like they were going to stop them anymore. Now, I thought there was a terrible timeout by New Orleans, and I was watching this game with a whole bunch of people. We had this ESPN party at Sundance, all these TVs and stuff. It was actually pretty fun. But so 3rd and 8 at the Minnesota 23-yard line with 1:52 left, following a Peterson run play that probably, if the Saints hadn't called a timeout, it would have been about 1:10 left. Minnesota would have had a 3rd and 8 from their own 23. But Peyton called a timeout immediately. What did you think of that timeout?
After the Chester Taylor run, or after
No. I'm saying it was 3rd and 8 at the Minnesota 23.
Right, and
Sean Payton called timeout instead of letting the clock run 40 seconds. Right. And
I think what he did there by calling timeout is he forced them to throw the football, which I think was clearly a mistake.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was a terrible timeout.
Exactly. Brad could have easily come out and let that clock run, and then that timeout prompted a pass, which then they blitzed, which all this rhetoric about how they blitzed and how they beat up Brett Favre, it's not a boxing match. Brett Favre getting hit never deterred him from making plays.
Right.
So all this talk that everybody's saying on television and the announcers, well, he took a beating. Well, that really, you don't judge the football game by boxing points. So it never stopped them. So then they blitz again. They miss the tackle and they get the first down. Now they're in real trouble.
Although you could make the case that if his feet were healthy, maybe he makes that throw, or maybe he tucks it and runs for 5 yards in that last play, other than. But when's
the last time you've really seen Brett Favre take it down and run?
Yeah,
his instinct as a football player is never to run the ball. Now he's brilliant and he moves around the pocket as well as anybody, sliding left to left, moving backwards, scrambling around like a wild man. But rarely does he just tuck it under his arm and go with it. It's just not natural. He's always looking to make a big play. So, But getting back to your point, that 3rd and 8 call there, the timeout by New Orleans before the call, and then they get the huge, they blitz. He gets it off, which the blitz hadn't worked all game. In terms of stopping them, maybe other than the Vilma interception. And then, he makes the first down, and all of a sudden now they come back and they throw the 20-yarder to Rice, which was a great throw. And then here's why the run was successful, because they were at New Orleans' 47. New Orleans was still playing pass at the time.
Yeah.
And when they get to the New Orleans 33 on the 14-yard gain, they start playing run all the time because New Orleans realizes that they're trying to run for 10 yards.
Or even 5.
5, right.
Yeah. I think Peyton got off the hook because I thought that 3rd and 8 timeout was terrible. And also, when you call timeout, it gives the team a chance to run to the sideline and maybe come up with something or talk to the coaches, whatever. I think in the heat of the moment, 3rd and 8.
You didn't put the pressure on Childress to make a good call.
I think they run on that. Don't you think they run on that 3rd and 8 otherwise?
Yeah, I think he might. I really do, and especially if the clock whittles down. I think he would have been more conservative. I think he would have been worried about it. And I think it puts pressure. Anytime you can make communications become the key issue for sidelines under pressure, maybe they even blow a timeout themselves. Maybe they lose 5 yards because of the play clock got reset and, they don't see it. All those things could happen. When you call a timeout, you let the opposing team regroup and you lose home field advantage.
Well, I thought of another idea for you. I think you came up with this first, and then I might have inadvertently stole it from you, or advertently stole it from you. But I forget who you were talking about. It was either Houston or Dallas. It was in your blog about a couple months ago, and you were talking about either the QB or the coach has to be one of those guys. You know, I got a guy. Don't worry, it's in good hands.
Right.
And we've seen these teams over and over again when that QB coach dynamic's a little sketchy, or they're not totally on the same page, or it's a little too risky, or there's not enough leadership at those two spots. We've seen it fall apart.
Right.
So what do we name this?
You know, I think it's like any guy who plays blackjack and he's won a couple hands and he starts counting his money. You know, I don't know what you call that. I think it's just a you know, Sean Payton, his triple reverses and all that. He's a guy. If you gamble with Sean Payton, and I'm not saying he's a gambler, but he's not going to count his money until it's over with.
Yeah, and the Childress Favre dynamic. I was afraid of it, and I really wanted to pick the Vikings in that game, and it just came down. And as it turned out, they covered, ironically. But as it turned out, you know, the thing that had kind of been hanging over their whole season came and bit them in the end. Now, explain to me the 12 men on the field, how that could happen.
Inexcusable. I mean, especially with the fact that it comes off a timeout.
But how does it happen? Like, whose mistake was it?
Well, according to Childress, they were going to come out in a formation that had two backs in the backfield. And then they decided to change to two tight ends, two receivers, and just one back in the backfield. But they didn't tell the fullback to come out of the huddle. And so that's why he was still in the huddle, because originally when they called the timeout, they were going to be in a two-back set. The fullback was on the field. But that's really inexcusable. And then what's really inexcusable is the fact that when you called that pass play, you said, look, Brett, we're either going to bang it to this guy or you got to run with it or throw it away. But we cannot take a sack and we can't have an interception. I mean, those are two things that have to be told. And I don't care if the quarterback's got 20 years experience, if he's got 2 years experience or 2 days experience. Every coach is saying it. Before Bill Walsh sent Joe Montana on the field on the great catch, he told him, throw it away. We'll live for another day. Right.
What's the longest field goal you think Longwell could have made?
I think under those pressure, he would have had the distance to make it. I think I would have been very uncomfortable at anything outside of 40 as being a Viking guy, just because I think it's very difficult under those pressure situations to make those kicks.
Did the best team win that game?
Well, no, the best team on that day didn't win because the Saints' offense just went to the tank. I mean, they just really couldn't function as well. And you know, if I were to tell you before the game that the Saints were going to be able to get less than 300 yards, you would say, well, the Vikings win rather easily. But with all that being said, I mean, the Vikings' two problems that never go away when Brad Childress is the head coach, and this is something Viking fans are just going to have to accept, is the game management situation, which was obviously very, very much aware of in the 2-minute drive, and his inability to fix the kickoff coverage teams.
Yeah.
Because we talked about this. I mean, the kickoff coverage teams, the Pierre Thomas return, the Courtney Roby return, all those things, 183 yards on returns is why the Vikings ended up losing the game besides the fumbles, which is now kind of gotten lost in the whole scheme of the game because everybody's focused on the interception, everybody's focused on the fumbles, but their kickoff coverage team was a disaster.
And it's also weird when you have, I think going into overtime, the Vikings had run 82 plays and the Saints had run 45. Now, as you said, with the kick returns, it shortened the field for the Saints a few times, but still to control the clock like they did, you would just think that the Saints defense would wear down the stretch. 82 plays. Holy.
They had one first down. The Saints had one first down in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
One first down in the fourth quarter. You know, they got dominated in the fourth quarter and they got the game to overtime. And it's going to require Minnesota to lose the game as opposed to New Orleans winning it.
Did Breeze have an underrated great game in that game?
I think what Breeze did was manage the game correctly. I think they were very concerned about the rush of Minnesota, and I think the receivers for New Orleans didn't make the plays typical that they had made all season.
Yeah.
Typically, Colston catches those balls down the seam, and he didn't make those catches, and he didn't make them, so that they never got into it. I never felt them in a rhythm offensively.
I agree.
Other than the opening drive, they never got into a rhythm, and they were struggling the whole day, and Minnesota in the game was never comfortable. I never thought the game was ever comfortable. And I think that's why Sean Payton challenged the third down play, because they struggled on third and short the whole game. and then he misread that snap, and it looked like Breeze might have got it, but then he kind of fumbled and he didn't. I think Sean knew once he punted the ball back to them, he could easily lose the game. I was almost surprised he didn't go for it.
I think the Vikings were better. You know, when you look at the advantage that the Saints had playing at home, especially, you know, being able to make so much noise when the Vikings were on offense. But then on the other side, you know, I met Aaron Rodgers on Saturday night. He was kind of an interesting guy, but he was talking about why he thought the Saints might win on Sunday. And he was saying how in the week before when Romo played in the Metrodome, when, you know, he was like, you just can't hear. Right. You can't hear anything. Like, people have no idea. Like, your guys in front of you can't hear anything. You're just basically going on blind snaps every time. And what Minnesota, you know, is so good at is just jumping the snap, and there's just no way to keep them off. But he thought in the Superdome, you know, Breeze could do long counts, he could do quick counts, he could do all kinds of things to kind of neutralize that jumping. And yet, I thought the Vikings front four was almost as good as it was in the Dallas game. They were all over him.
Yeah, I thought so too, and I think that's the difference. And that's why I think New Orleans has got to be worried about the Super Bowl playing against Freeney and Mathis, because the one thing that's been proven to slow down their offense has been the defensive line, specifically on the edges that can attack him and get up the field. Miami did it. Look, Miami's a team that played both these Super Bowl teams as well as anybody.
Yeah.
And they did it with their fronts. And Miami could sit there, and that's the tape everybody's going to watch against one another. And Miami did it because their front was able to, for parts of the game, control the quarterback in the pocket. And then they lost it. But that, to me, is how you beat New Orleans. You better control him in the pocket with some pressure and never get past him. And that's what the worst position to be in football is 2 yards past the quarterback. And oftentimes when you play Breeze, you're past him.
Well, I went into that Saints game thinking if they win and they look good, that Super Bowl line has to be 3 or less. And then after the game, we went to dinner, and I was saying, you know, I guess 3.5 for the line, and I thought it would go up, which, as it turned out, is what happened. I think it started either 3.5 or 4 in most casinos, and now it's up to 5.5 or 6. And I just think, you know, maybe it's a combination of how good the Colts have been all year, but it's just really hard to make a case for the Saints after watching that game. They had every advantage that you could have wanted in that game, and still really should not have won.
Right,
you know?
And then you add that Peyton Manning, who doesn't make those mistakes, who won't throw the ball in the wrong place, you know, can do a lot of damage to, you know, all this talk about Greg Williams' blitz package and all that. If he tries that blitz package against Peyton Manning, he may get torched for 40. And
I thought, go ahead.
It didn't work against Favre. Again, I keep saying this. It didn't work against Favre. He had 81 plays, 31 first downs, 475 yards. Somebody explained to me how the New Orleans defense it worked. The fumbles were almost self-induced fumbles.
Yeah.
They weren't even like, oh my gosh, hard hits, an arm gets in there. They were just careless and negligence on the part of the Vikings. So I think Greg Williams' challenge this week is how can I hold this team to under 30? I really do.
It's, you know, when you look at all the things that the Vikings could do, they could throw deep, they could run the ball, they could rush the passer. I thought their actual return guys were good, not stopping the return, but it seemed like they could do almost more things than any other team that was left in the playoffs. It's a little perplexing that they're not in the Super Bowl. I just don't. I look at the Saints team, and it's like pretty much a challenge for them to run the ball against a good defense.
Yeah.
You know, you could throw it, but do they have a receiver that you love? You know, as we saw in that Minnesota game, as you pointed out, nobody really stepped up.
They melted to the pressure of the game, and they didn't seem to make a play. And look, the Saints are a lot like the Philadelphia Eagles in the sense that they have to rely on a big play. And, you know, it comes off of screens at times, and it comes vertically down the field. And Dallas stopped the big play, and people have been playing them a different way since the Dallas game. Don't give up the big play. Don't bite on the double moves. Stay heavier in the seams. Don't let them throw those seam routes. And they've really had a harder time coming back with it. Now, I think Sean Payton's a great coach. I think he's very creative in terms of offensive game plans. I was disappointed with what they did against Minnesota because I thought they would have been able to do to Minnesota what every other road team had done. But they didn't do it, which makes me worry about the Saints.
Is this line too low?
You know, I don't know lines as well, but I know this. Peyton Manning is, to me, playing at a level never seen before in the National Football League. And these receivers are better for Indianapolis than they probably have been. You know, with all great respect to Marvin Harrison, towards the end, he wasn't the same player. And now Pierre Garçon gives him a vertical outside threat. And then Colley's a tough matchup. And, with all the parts they have working for them, they're just tough to stop offensively or tough to match. And then defensively, I think they're so underrated because they are so fast, especially when they get into the red area. And I think Larry Cloyer is the unsung hero of the team because he's changed their defense. He hasn't just kind of combined the defense. They're not a true Tampa team. They play a very good style of defense. So I think the Colts are by far the best team, and I think they proved it the way they came back from 17-6, 4-play drive, 17-13, and they wore down the Jets, something that everybody thought, including myself, the Jets would wear them down.
Well, you know me, I'm a Brady guy. First of all, I thought that was Manning the best game I've ever seen him have. Maybe you could say the 2006 AFC title game, the way he brought the Colts back. But the Pats really collapsed in that game defensively. With the Jets, it was, they were really playing at a high level and they had a lot of momentum. And it seemed like they kind of had figured out what to do. And Manning just solved it. Like you could just see it happening. He was just like, all right, well, I have these 2-3 things. I think I can, and then boom, 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 boom. And by the end of the third quarter, you knew the Jets were done. They had no plan B. As you said, his best game ever. Is he underrated now?
I've never seen a guy take a team. He shifts the balance of power so much in his favor. And I wrote about this on Monday. I mean, it's unique in sense of how he does it because he shifts the balance of power because if, the team around them isn't quite as good as everybody as like the best team, but he is so good and so dominant at his position. He makes all those other players great, and he is Jordan-esque in his ability. And I would argue that with anybody. I don't think even if you don't like Peyton Manning or the Colts and you're a Patriot fan or a Jet fan, you have to marvel. The throw to Austin Collie on the 47-yarder is one of the great throws of all time. And then his ability to make sure that those players made plays. I mean, he didn't try to force the ball into Dallas Clark. He realized that Reggie Wayne wasn't really going to be the first option, and he worked with what he had, and he made those players better. Plus, he was very smart. I mean, he went over to the coach after the second series of the game. They changed. They played the first game really in one personnel group, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. They started this game out in the same formational group, and they got sacked twice. He went over to the coach. They changed. They went to 3 receivers. Get Lito Shepherd on the field after the injury, and the next thing you know, they finally found their rhythm. That was something that the Saints never really did, find their rhythm.
I think he's playing at the highest level I've ever seen him play. First 10 games for the Pats in 2007 before Sammy Morris got hurt. Brady was at the same level, I think. And I think Montana got there that one playoffs. I forget when it was. I think it might have been 89 when he had the 3 playoff games. And he had like 12 touchdowns, no interceptions, something like that. But that's really it. That's all I can come up with. I mean, from the people in my lifetime, I've never seen anybody do that.
Yeah, I have never seen anybody play like this because he just takes the game over. And intellectually he takes the game over, and then physically he takes the game over. I mean, I love Joe Montana. I won a Super Bowl with Joe Montana, but the plays were coming into Joe, and Joe executed the plays brilliantly. This guy is telling everybody what to do, running the plays. Not that he's not getting any help because they have 2 really good coaches in Howard Mudd and Tom Moore on the sidelines helping, but Manning's running that show. He's conducting the orchestra and then executing.
Him and Brady were offensive coordinators this year, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's, when you look at New England's numbers offensively this year, it's tough to be critical of their offense in terms of what they were able to do, the categories that they finished in the top 5, 6 of. But when the Patriots needed to make plays, they couldn't make a play. They couldn't come back. They couldn't come back in the second half of the Jets game. They gained a lot of yards in the first half, couldn't come back. The Denver game, they've got the ball with a chance to win the game in the fourth quarter, can't do it. The Miami game, chance to win the game in the fourth quarter, they couldn't do it. The New England offense this year, when you really watch and study it, is there's a lot of yards, but when the competition is high and it's crunch time is when they folded.
Well, and the other issue is, basically you can't throw to the tight end because he stinks. They had no third receiver the whole year.
Right.
Manning has 4 guys to go to, and that's what I was most impressed by in that Jets game was they took out Wayne, and he was just like, boom, 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 went to the other guys. Aaron Schatz on our podcast last week said that he wished there was a way to bet that Pierre Garçon would be the MVP of that AFC title game, which I thought was an interesting prediction. Turned out, the guy was open the whole game. How much of it is
that was the sad thing, because, I mean, if you're a Jet fan, you went into that game before you took the field. You said, they wanted Colley and they wanted Garcon to play in the game, and so did the Colts.
And Colley had a drop fairly early on, and I remember turning to somebody I was with, and I was like, "See, young receivers, this is why you can't count on them in a big game." Manning went right back to him, and then he had that great touchdown catch. If Manning overthrows the 47-yarder, which really, as you said, was one of the great throws in recent memory, if he overthrows him by 1 yard and the Colts go into halftime 17-6, do you think they win that game?
No, I don't. I think the Jets are just bursting with unbelievable. And then Sanchez is growing leap and bounds as the game's going on. And he really didn't, other than one throw to Braylon Edwards, he didn't make a bad throw in the game.
I thought he was the revelation in the playoffs. Who saw that coming?
He grew up, and he did it outside in Cincinnati with the wind, and he had to deal with the weather. And then he did it he did it in San Diego, and and obviously he did it against the Colts. It wasn't the interception late in the game was just but no, they grew up as an offense, and I think that now they have to take with the steps that they have and grow with it. They have to, and I wrote about this yesterday. They have to avoid the disease of me, and they have to act as if
disease of more. It's disease of more.
Yeah. And they have to act as if they didn't make the playoffs, because they can really build on something here.
Well, the Jet, I'm fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to know some Jets fans who I call friends, but their attitude is, hey, we have a quarterback and a running back and a coach. We didn't make the Super Bowl, but we have those three things, not just going into next year, but the next 5. Not a lot of teams can say that.
Absolutely, and I think that I flew back from Indianapolis to Los Angeles with a classic Jet fan, depressed, demoralized, but said the same thing. Of course, he was carrying a Mets bag. Did all Jet fans have Met bags with them too? They go hand in hand.
The Jets and the Mets, for some reason, you have to root for both if you root for one. You never meet a Jets Yankee fan. Very, very rarely. It's for some reason it lines up down the line. Yeah, I think it would have been. I think Jets Saints, I would have more of the attitude of, I have no idea what's going to happen in this game. I think the Colts, man, and now you wonder, like, if they had gone for 16-0, and they had the pressure of the 19-0, I do think that would have been a detriment. Now they could just go and they win the Super Bowl, and they don't have that pressure, and the Don Shula, Mercury Morris part isn't there, and they're not answering a million 19-0 questions. I feel like that wore down the Pats. I don't know if you agree with me. Do you agree with me?
I don't know. I mean, with this guy at quarterback, and like his speech after the game to the team, just keep grinding. I think he relishes the challenge of it, and they do such a great job of handling. That locker room is pretty strong because there's so many young players in there that he handles it, and Freeney handles it, and they have a way of controlling it, and he just keeps grinding. I think they easily could have beaten. It could have been 16-0 and easily could be 18-0 right now. But, they chose to go this way, and they stayed healthy, and it probably benefited them. But I think they could handle the pressure. I'm not saying they did something wrong. I would have loved to see them go for it, but I think they could handle the pressure.
Tony Dungy leaves the Bucs, they win the title. Tony Dungy leaves the Colts, it looks like they're going to win the title. Does this mean anything?
Well, I think the change that I don't think Caldwell gets enough credit for the change of defensive structurally and how they kind of reinvented themselves without really announcing it to the world that they reinvented themselves. They're much faster on defense. They play a different style. Larry Coyer makes great adjustments. They play the run defense way better than they ever played run defense before in the past. And I think that, what I thought that I liked about what Caldwell did was he kept the same structure in place, but he put his personality into it. Now, he doesn't call offensive plays or defensive plays, but he changed the special teams coach. He changed the defensive coordinator, and he basically told the team that I'm just not a lapdog here. I'm not just the substitute teacher. I've got some influence, and I think that really made a difference.
So you ducked that question. Kind of ducked the question a little bit.
Well, I don't know how to answer that question because, I think Peyton Manning has made a lot of people's careers, including Tony Dungy's,
Because I did feel like the Colts underachieved last year. I do think that because whether he's going to leave, whether he's not going to leave, you could even say the last 2 years because, they lost consecutive playoff games where they were favorites. And I don't know.
I agree because I've had this conversation with Bill Parcells. when he would always called him Hamlet because he didn't to be or not to be. He didn't know what he wanted to do at the end of the year. And I said, Bill, sometimes your indecision rubs off on your team.
Yeah.
And your team always takes on the personality of the coach. And I think that oftentimes that indecision, well, he's not going to be here next year, so what do I care? And I'm not saying that it comes out in the open, but it's overtly. It's kind of it's inside of them. And I think that unless they realize that you're definitely coming back, there's not that sense of urgency. And I do think that had Tunji stayed with an unlimited future, they probably could have achieved this. However, with the uncertainty, I'm coming back, I'm not coming back, the Hamlet type approach doesn't work.
All right, here's my take. I think Tampa probably would have won if he stayed, just because of the way that season kind of the way that season broke and all the weird things that happened that year, and that really was a good Tampa team. I think they win with whoever the coach is. This time around, though, I do think, as you said, the indecision, maybe the fact that they have a guy who they know is going to be there, maybe that did help them. I think he gets credit for laying down the infrastructure of this team, I think. But the GM, I think, should get a little more credit than maybe most football GMs, just because he just keeps nailing these. Why couldn't the Patriots have had Garcon?
Well, I think what he does is he's unique. Bill Polian is going to get in the Hall of Fame because if he wins this game, it'll be 2 Super Bowls there. He was at 3 in Buffalo. He went to 1 in Carolina. And he's always done this drafting of the quarterback, and he's always built the team around the quarterback and around a certain style of player and never kidded himself. I mean, they're never the baseball team, the baseball team that has 3 really good pitchers and not a lot of hitting, and they trade the good pitcher for a hitter, and then all of a sudden their pitching falls apart. Well, the Colts are the team that just keeps thinking they're about an offensive team. And they'll fill in the blanks on defense, but, they're about the quarterback, the receiver, the running back. They're going to keep filling in the blanks on offense, and they don't make any bones about it. So when they draft Anthony Gonzalez in the first round, you say, why would they do that? They got enough receivers, don't they? No, this team's built around the quarterback, and it's built around the offense, and it's built around making sure we're successful there.
And, if I definitely did not hit a home run with Joe Adai. Donald Brown, jury's still out. I haven't been that impressed by him. He's been a little banged up. But, man, if they had nailed one of those 2 running back picks,
I think the one that Polian's probably wondering, and I'm sure he's kicking himself because I know it was a debate in their office, is whether they picked Sean Green or Donald Brown. I mean, they went back and forth on that decision, and I know from talking to him after he still liked Donald Brown for them, but he really liked Sean Green, maybe just not the perfect fit for them. Could you imagine if he put Sean Green on that team?
Well, if Sean Green doesn't get hurt in that game, is that game different? I feel like it's not.
I don't think it is either. I think I think Manning was taking the game over. I think that the 17-13 halftime, everybody in the stadium knew when they got the ball to start that drive at the 2-minute warning. They thought that everybody knew that if they could get this game to 17-6, it was going to be trouble for the Colts. If it got 17-9, maybe not so much. 17-13, they were going to take it over, and 4 plays later, that's what happened. See, I do think the Colts made a tactical mistake in the game. They should have deferred. They should have given the Jets the ball first.
Oh, you're right. That would have been a good move. Why didn't they do that?
I don't know. I mean, I would have put my defense on the field first, set the tempo. I think if I'm Peyton Manning, I want the ball to start the second half all the time.
The biggest mistake of that game, though, was the 52-yard field goal.
Without a doubt. Another turnover. The Jets went through the playoffs with five missed field goals, so they had +5 advantage in turnovers, and just that alone, even though they were only +1 going in the game on turnovers. Yeah. And then they give up 2 themselves. And every Jet fan knew when they sent that kicker on the field for 52 yards, it was a mistake. Not only a mistake, but a game changer. You know what would have been an interesting call there? The direct snap to Feely pooch punt. Yeah. Anything, and again, it just goes into it's Manning just forces you to change how you think offensively because, field position really doesn't mean anything with Manning. 2 plays, he's out to midfield. That's A. And B, you're trying to accumulate as many points as you possibly can every time you have possession of the football. So it's the curse of Manning that caused you to kick the 52-yarder. See, right. That's why he affects how you operate on offense as much as anything. What 3 things that need to happen for the Saints to win this game? Have to have the ball last. They have to have the ball last. It's got to be a close game. They got to be within 6 points or less and have it last. And they got to win on the last 1 or 2 plays of the game. And they've got to be able to keep pace with the Colts on offense, and they've got to have their best day in the red zone. They have to have their finest day in the red zone. They can't give up 7 and score 3. They can't be down 14-6. They can't be down 21-9. They've got to be able to match and be really good in the red area. Because look, they gave up the Jets gave up 30 points. The number one defense in the league gave up 30 points to the Colts, and the Colts were 3 of 6 in the red zone. The Colts had one of the worst red zone days in a long time, and they still scored 30 points.
Remember the column I wrote heading into the playoffs about how it was a passing league and all that stuff?
Yep.
And then I went 0-4 in round 1. I should have just waited to write that column until round 2.
Yeah.
Because as it turned out, it is a passing league. I mean,
it is. It is
how
clearly
people
a
win.
passing league. And one-dimensional teams, now the Jets won't be one-dimensional next year, but in the playoffs they were one. That's why the Bengals were such an easy target to eliminate out of the playoffs. They're one-dimensional.
Yeah, I'm shocked by Sanchez. Sanchez is good. I mean, not only did he play well, but he throws a really nice ball. He throws like a nice 15-yarder. It's always right on target and stuff. Last question. Is Philly a basketball town?
No. We're going to have to start watching Villanova. Because it's not a pro basketball town. It's a great college basketball town. But nobody's coming to watch the Sixers play, and who could blame them?
This is the argument. I saw Mike Tolan this weekend, diehard Philly fan. And I was explaining to him that I don't think Philly has ever been a pro basketball town. I think it's a college town. It's you get the 5 schools, and you have all the great history of the guys that have come out of there. But they just do not respond to pro basketball. And you've had you had Wilt, you had Iverson, you had Barkley. Dr. J barely sold out for any of those people.
It's a pro football town, not a college football town, and it's a college basketball town, not a pro basketball town. That's the way I see it. And even though I'm a Sixer fan, I watch it, and they're very painful for me to watch, but I still do. But I marvel that people actually go down to the Wachovia Center to watch it, because I just don't see. I see so many empty seats, and I wonder how could they actually sit there and watch this. It's painful. That's why I have to become a Villanova fan.
Want to hear the
one other thing I want to say this. I really believe this. If I'm a Jet fan, I put Eric Mangini on the cover of my 2010 media guide. Thanking him.
You want to hear how I want to save the Sixers?
Yes.
I trade Iguodala to Houston for T-Max expiring with Jason Capono. And then I trade Elton Brand for Arenas. What do you think of that?
I'm all for it. I'm going to go to GM.com, realgm.com, and Google and see if this trade works on the trade tracker.
Well, the first one definitely works. I'm not sure. Let's go in the trade tracker. We'll trade checker right now live. I think Philly might have to throw in one more salary.
All I would do, I'd do anything to get rid of Willie Green. Can I trade Willie Green for a salami sandwich somewhere?
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to have Willie Green be in that trade. So you got Willie Green and Elton Brand for Arenas. Oh, this looks like this might work. Yes, this trade is successful. So there you go. So now you got rid of you got rid of Willie, you got rid of Iguodala, you got rid of Elton Brand, you got Gilbert Arenas and T-Max expiring. I actually think Gilbert, not a bad gamble for another team. If it's a team like Philly that has Elton Brand's terrible contract anyway, why not have Gilbert's terrible contract instead?
So then you put Spates in the starting lineup. You have Dallenberg. You have Arenas. You actually know. You put Theo Young in the starting lineup. You're no worse for the wear, and plus you've improved your cap.
And Gilbert, at least people are talking. Nobody's talking about Elton Brand. And if you're Washington, you've gotten rid of Gilbert, and you've got somebody who's Elton Brand's not awful. So anyway, there's my way to save the Sixers. Mike Lombardi.
I'm all for it.
We'll try to lock you down next week, but
I'm booked for next week. I am on the Bill Simmons podcast next week. I wouldn't miss it. Are you coming or not?
Might be coming for 3 days. I will keep you posted.
All right, good. Let me know.
All right, best man at my wedding. I was the best man in his wedding. I bought him a Vikings helmet as my present. I've been tied to the fortunes of his team for the last 20 years vicariously, and now he's here in the podcast. My buddy Geoff. Are you alive? How you feeling?
Complex litigation. This is Geoff. I am not feeling good. That was preposterous. I've been buying Zoloft in bulk from Canada since Sunday night.
At what point did it become inevitable?
There's so many points in the game that you can't really single one out. I think it became inevitable when I actually thought they were going to win.
When was that?
That was when they managed to get that drive down there, and what may ultimately known as the series.
Yeah.
And this is before for the 12 men on the field call. At that point, I thought they were going to do it, and I thought Longwell would kick the field goal and we'd be in great shape.
Yeah, I was already worried about Longwell because I figured he'd at least get to like the 20.
Yeah.
And
But they didn't. The truth is, what did they have to do there? And I think it would have been a 50-yard field goal.
Yep.
Or something. And so the truth is that they had a shot at that. What you don't want to do is have 2 running plays for losses and then go with the 12 men on the field.
Do you think Childress called the 12 men on the field, or was that an accident?
Yeah. Well, this is the problem with Childress. And there was I think they took some poll in one of the Vikings papers, and they asked, who was it, it caused for the Vikings loss, and you could take, was it fumbles, interceptions, the crowd noise, and Childress was an option, and I think it came in at close to 70% from the fans. So he definitely had something to do with it.
And now he's coming back for 3 more years.
Well, here's the thing. One of the things that people should do is go check out a Childress interview on YouTube or elsewhere, and he'll make these mistakes, but he'll have you believing that it's almost the right thing afterward. He's mastered this. He chews his gum, comes in with the deep voice, and he'll do like, yeah, we sent 12 men out there to see what kind of look the Saints would give us. We thought that'd be a big advantage next year if we went to 12 on each side. And fortunately, if NFL doesn't change the rules, it's gonna be and he goes like that.
And it makes sense after a while. Cause
it makes sense. You're like, yeah, I could see that. It could be good. And there's nothing. I mean, I still think the profile of the bald, bearded, fat coach works. It's just that he's got to change something with the play calling.
Right, because this year his big change was the facial hair.
Facial hair was big, and I think as that started to come in fully, he actually opened our Favre up a little. Because you remember at the beginning of the year, they really wouldn't let him do anything.
Yeah.
He was, Favre was throwing for 150, 180. He was still playing good games, but the playbook was still, sort of the Tavares, Brad Johnson playbook.
Now, all right, well, let's go to where Favre is rolling around the ground. It actually looked like one of the old Tecmo Bowl injuries where you intentionally would break the guy's knee and he just rolls around.
There's a man down.
And so now at that point you're thinking Tavares is coming in.
No, I didn't. I mean, Favre's tough. I mean, I don't know if he was hurt, but he might have been playing that up, to try to get the penalty. But I know at no point did I think Tavares was going to come in that game. And you really can't be angry at Favre in this, because they wouldn't be there without him. That's the reality of it.
So you have no bad ill will, any of that stuff toward Favre.
Not towards Favre. I think the fumbles put Favre in the mindset that he wasn't in the whole year, where I have to win this game.
Yeah.
And so he started doing old risky Favre. And for instance, the cross the body pass.
It's a Favre staple. Back in the day.
Back in the day. And the only guy who could probably make that pass is Brad Johnson, because he throws it 8 yards short, it hits the ground, and then they can still light up the field goal. But no, of all people, you're not angry at him. They statistically, they did so well in that game. And I don't know if you saw the Sports Bureau. I think one of them came out with the biggest yardage differential that any team had ever lost a game in the playoffs, and that's the Vikings.
And they ran almost twice as many plays.
It's domination.
Well, there's some ironies here because, first of all, you've always loved weird-looking coaches who look like serial killers. So you actually have one on your team now, but yet you're against him, which I think is interesting.
I am at this point,
Favre is somebody, we used to gamble against all the time, waiting for him to make that terrible throw, and it was like a running joke with us. Oh, here it comes, it's going to come. And now he's on your team. And you don't see the terrible throw coming. He's like roped you in for basically 4.5 months. And then there comes the throw. And that third down, no part of you was thinking, this throw might be coming?
He'd been playing so well for so long. I mean, I suppose you always think he's capable. We've known it. I mean,
you dropped your guard.
You drop your guard.
Yeah.
And then it happens. And then all the pain comes back 30-plus years. And it ends right there. And you knew they had no chance at the coin flip at that point either.
I was going to say, has there ever been – that was the first coin flip where one team was like a 4-1 favorite? And a heads-tail coin toss?
As soon as Hutchinson he called heads, it was over. It was devastating. But the question is, if this is the Vikings, let's say they kick the field goal. Don't you see, him trotting out, all of a sudden – the jersey is numbered 1. He's wearing a single bar, and it goes, wide right.
Right.
I mean, at some point, they were trying to a team. I've never seen a team try to lose a game more, or they just were so afraid of winning. And so at some point, it was going to happen, and they kept trying and trying, and finally they sealed the deal.
Or he would have made the field goal. And then the kickoff would have been run back for a touchdown, like a Music City Miracle type thing. That was in play as well.
Vintage Minnesota. Right. Actually, in some ways, this ended better because the Saints actually had to do something. The Vikings beat the Vikings. The final score should have been, Vikings 31, Vikings 28.
Oh, that's true. Just remove the Saints entirely. I like that.
Yeah, but you can't advance the Vikings because the team you'd advance is the same one that lost to the Vikings. It doesn't make any sense, but you know what I'm saying.
Now, I actually watched the Darren Nelson game with you. I did not watch the Gary Anderson game with you because you had just moved, but I think we had been on the phone for most of that game, and then we obviously didn't watch this last one. But the Darren Nelson one still feels to me like the worst one. That was to me the most exciting because that was the team that shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have been there, and they wanted to beat the Saints in New Orleans with that phenomenal win. Then it was the win in San Francisco, which was another double-digit underdog win. And they could have won that game. So, but that's the thing about the Vikings is, that one hurt the most because it was the most exciting. But otherwise, these should hurt more. But the history of them is when they have the best teams, they can't win. I mean, Bud Grant called the team that lost on the Hail Mary. Yeah. That was the best team that never went to the Super Bowl. The 98 Vikes were, they may have easily been the best team in the league that year. They lost to Atlanta. And then this year's team, pretty damn good. They slipped at the end, but if you beat Dallas and the way they statistically beat New Orleans, this is a team that should be in the Super Bowl, and they can't do it. So I came out of it thinking they were better than the Saints, and that
I think a lot of people did. Yeah. And
there's Brad Childress though. Like, it does come down to coaching. Mike Lombardi pointed out before he came on that all that return yardage they gave up, another Vikings trait during the Childress era, that hurt them as much as anything.
That was pretty bad. And that was something they had fixed earlier, and then it seemed to vanish. But they were doing this. I'll give them some leeway because they did lose E.J. Henderson, middle linebacker. Antoine Winfield was hurt, to play as well as they did with those negatives. I mean, it was a good team. I mean, I don't want to give them credit. I mean, there's any upside. It's that no city will now be willing to lure the Vikings away. So it's like the only positive. But since the 70s now, well, we've talked about this. You've got 3 teams now who haven't made it, and it's Detroit, Cleveland, and Minnesota. That doesn't count as expansion teams.
And that's coming off the heels of losing in 4 Super Bowls.
Yeah, and so Buffalo's in the same boat, except Buffalo at least got there those 4 times. Detroit's good to its fans because it never surprises them. It never lets them down. They give them a bad team and they know it. So you never crestfallen. Cleveland probably comes close, right? Because
I wrote about this last Friday about the Mount Rushmore effed up fan bases. I think that the thing that sets the Vikings and the Browns and the Bills apart is that now the fans just expect it. And they've had all these tragedies they can look back at and that have kind of shaped the way they watch football. Whereas like with the Saints, how many terrible games have the Saints lost? They're just terrible. Like they don't actually have terrible tragedies strewn throughout history.
Right. They just generally lost.
Yeah, and the Lions are the same thing. Like, Lions can be like, oh, yeah, we suck. But if you ask the Lions, like, what are the 7 worst losses you've ever had? They, I don't even know if they could come up with them. But, the Vikings, these are like life-shaping losses.
They're they're terrible, and that's why. Thank God, and this is some people say, thank God it wasn't the Super Bowl, and that's the mindset. And that's not a healthy mindset to enjoy a conference championship loss because of that.
Now, with your son, is your son a Vikings fan, or have you intentionally steered him away?
I don't really want to inflict that pain. I've both of the kids own jerseys, and they do ask about it, but. Sometimes they ask, why do the Vikings always lose? And so I'm always defending questions, so it may slowly be ingrained, but they did not watch this game with me, which is good.
I pictured like some sort of Forrest Gump scenario where remember when Forrest is watching TV with his son? But beforehand, he says to the wife, like, is he going to be like me? Like, you almost want to avoid that with your kids. I know I was bad before the Red Sox won in 2004. Like, that was a real issue for me, whether I wanted to do this to my children. Unfortunately, they won. But
it was. But you've got the Clippers thing going too.
Well, I'm just not even going to let them, they're being real Celtic fans.
It's really the Celtics, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're taking them to the clip.
No, I stopped because I felt like they were going to get infected somehow. And I'm not going to take my son to a Clippers game at his time. I don't want him to think that that's the right way for things to operate.
It isn't. And you've written about it.
Yeah.
You got to attach on. You got to attach on to a better team. You should, if you get a chance. There's this thing on YouTube called the Missing Rings. And they go through some of these teams who were great and should have won, but they couldn't. And one of them, I think it's the '69 Vikings, sums it up. And there's this hot air balloon at the beginning of the game, and there's a Viking in it, and he's getting dragged across the field, and he can't get control of it, and he's screaming, and he's heading up into the stands, and the fans freak out. And since then, it's just been a disaster.
Is that true? I never knew about that.
I never knew. Yeah, I looked at it recently. I'm like, hey, it all goes back to this.
Yeah.
They just can't get it right.
Well, I think they've reached that zone where, and the Red Sox were in it, where if it does happen, it's got to be a complete fluke and something that you've already written them off and then they rally back. Like, they can't win conventionally. This is what happened to the Red Sox. Down 3-0, down by a run in the ninth inning, season's over. We all just want them to win the one game. We're never expecting to win 8 straight. And then this chain of events unfolds that, you just get swept up into it, and then you just start believing.
I remember that. I remember them being down. And
your mother-in-law is a Red Sox fan, so you get it. But so for the Vikings, I think for them to actually pull this off, maybe, NFC second round or championship game, whatever, but down 27-3 in the fourth quarter, some crazy, and then something like that. Other than that, I just think now the Viking fans have reached a point where they're watching these games. Although, wait a second, though. You said you did believe they would win.
Yeah, right at the end. I mean, normally when your team gets down, like, close to the 30-yard line, with under a minute left, and we got 4 plays, it's a pretty good chance.
Right.
That they're not going to keep, losing yards, get a penalty, and then throw an interception.
But the weird thing about the Vikes is that they've managed to stagger these in 10-year intervals so that people, as you said, let your guard down a little. But so when was Darren Nelson? 88?
Yes, yeah.
And then Randall Cunningham was 98?
That's right. So we had about a 10-year span.
10 years to talk yourself back into it. And now this was 11 years. And it's like, maybe these guys are different. But now it's...
Yeah, but here's what kills me. And you've sort of been spoiled because the Red Sox kept it together after that first one. The Patriots kept it together. And even the Eagles have done well. But most teams, the window's open, and then it closes. For whatever reason, even if you bring back most of the same players. So
would you be happy if Favre came back, right?
I'd be thrilled.
You love Favre. That was the one thing that's come out of this, is that you love Brett Favre.
I think I do, because remember they were writing articles how he was removed and a little bit of a recluse in his final years in Green Bay, and he didn't fraternize so much with players. But with Minnesota, that wasn't the case. He was involved in the locker room. He was. It seemed like he was close to the players. The team had a good chemistry. So far, for some reason, worked in Minnesota.
Is there anything you want to say to the people of Wisconsin who celebrated on Sunday like their own team had won?
Look, I don't know what their problem is. They should be so upset. It's just not right. There's no need to hate the Vikings. They get a lot of good years out of Favre. And,
it's bitterness. It's like spurned girlfriends. I'm with them on it. To be, I think if the roles were reversed and he had been with, if it had been Kramer and Kramer was as good as Favre and he was your guy for 20 years and you were with him through a couple drunk drivings, and all that stuff, and then finally he goes to Green Bay and and all of a sudden he's pointing fingers after touchdowns and stuff. You would be bitter.
I may be bitter. Let me ask you this: with Roger Clemens, what was the net you think of the fan base?
Oh, we hated him. We wanted him to get run over by a tractor trailer.
All right, I think you made your point.
I totally get it. Well, we went to Lambeau in the big Lambeau field column I wrote 3 years ago. You were one of the guys there, and you saw firsthand, like it was 90% Favre jerseys. Yeah,
they still love him. They wanted it to event it differently. But the truth is, if the Vikings don't get a new stadium, I think it's possible that, maybe to really tick them off, that maybe the Vikings will start playing at Miller Stadium. They'll just travel there for all their home games. Drive people nuts.
I had a reader theorize that this is the curse of playing indoors, and that the Vikings cursed themselves by going from outdoors, where they had such a giant advantage and they were the prototypical outdoors team, to going indoors. I guess my response would be, well, how does that explain the 4 Super Bowls? I think it stretches back before the outdoors change.
I wish that were true, because there's nothing Viking fans want more than an outdoor stadium. That was the whole identity. I mean, that's really why I love them since I was a kid, and the snow.
And the uniforms and the helmet.
The uniforms and the helmets and the losing tradition. It always a nice cocktail, but I don't know. I think there's something. There's more to it about it, and I just. But if they could get back outside. Oh.
So do you want to rank the last 3? Wait, give me your top 5 most devastating Viking losses.
All right, top 5.
Yep. Now, granted, this is tainted a little by the fact that you hit them at different points of your life. You obviously care a little more about sports when you're 20 and under and stuff like that. So, so you can factor that in.
The Darren Nelson loss was number 1.
Yeah, because he was running toward. I mean, you had it.
It was right there. Would have just been the perfect season to the Super Bowl. Number 2 would have to be, even though it was later, the Morton Anderson missed.
Gary Anderson.
Gary Anderson missed field goal. This is strange, but the loss to the Giants, where they went to the Meadowlands.
Oh, the 41-0.
Oh, I mean that was terrible.
Because it was over within 2 minutes.
2 minutes,
and then you had to watch it.
And the way they were announcing it, like, I've never seen this. There's no defense on the Vikings.
Yeah.
That was bad.
Wow, you put that one ahead of Sunday.
Sunday, here's the thing. This is about age and expectation.
Yeah.
And even though I thought for that little window they were going to win, it wasn't as if, can you be shocked? So that would be number 4, I guess. And then there's a hodgepodge probably at number 5.
Well, the interesting part here is
probably the Cardinals lost, but they didn't get into the playoffs.
The interesting part here is that you started rooting for the Vikings during the year of the Hail Mary, and that kind of shaped you.
That was the one. That was the Sports Illustrated cover. Dallas wins a shocker. And it was Wally Hilgenberg. And unlike, I should have been drawn to the winner like most kids. And I just jumped on that loser bandwagon. And and there's no, once you do it, you really can't turn back. I sent you that eBay link where somebody was trying to sell his allegiance because he had it with the Vikings. But the truth is, you can't do it. You just suffer. Well,
you picked the Vikings when you were 6. And Michael Myers, that's when he killed his sister when he was 6. Halloween's your favorite movie. I'm seeing a lot of connections here.
I like this. They could hire Rob Zombie as a consultant.
They remake Halloween about a Viking fan who picks the Vikings at age 6 and eventually just starts committing murders. All right, buddy, hang in there. Thanks for coming on the BS Report. As a Red Sox fan, I will tell you that when it does happen, all of this pain is worth it.
I'm waiting. I'm still waiting.
All right.
Talk to you soon. Later.
so I get % off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
You laughed, you cried, you turned up the sound repeatedly, and now it's all over. This concludes another installment of the BS Report. And with all the talk about sports, Bill Simmons neglected to mention this important just breaking news. Subway is home to the famous $5 footlong, so celebrate your favorite Subway famous $5 footlong, like the classic BLT or the Big Bowl Black Forest ham and cheese. All stacked your way with the meats, cheeses, and fresh, crisp veggies you love.